Hi, here's the Shotgun Colorist, the founder of Shade & Grain. Welcome back to another episode of the Basic of Color Theory Key Knowledge. Today's topic is what is dynamic range and how it works. Definition of the dynamic range according to the internet, it refers to which camera can successfully capture the lightest and darkest area of an image without losing the details. Once this range is exceeded, the highlights will wash out to white and the darks will turn to black blobs. So the higher dynamic range, the better. Any questions? I hope you enjoyed this video. That wasn't even a small demonstration of this discipline. So let's break it down. There's more than one definition for DR, but practically speaking it means maximum signal to the noise ratio. But we'll break it down in a bit. First, I have to warn you, this one is the real math. In histogram, we challenge you with highest order, which calls max signal, OL capacity, and everything beyond that is basically clipped. The sensor in the digital camera is actually an analog device. When the light photons hit the sensor, the photons charge the voltage. Let's say a photon is equal to a voltage, however, it only works up to a point. It's a non-capacitant. Each sensor has a maximum amount of the charge that photosensitive material can store it at once. And if it's well charged, the voltage doesn't change. So the power of the image is effectively clipped and can no longer contain information. This is the reason why our highlights inflate when the power of the image is too bright. If you only had to worry about the sweep capacity, we could reduce the exposure until no pixel is exposed anymore. However, on the other side, the shadows are waiting for us in our display. Noise increases with the sensitivity setting in the camera, length of exposure, temperature, and even varies among the different camera models. The signal from the sensor is much stronger than any random fluctuation. When the signal is weaker, the noise is stronger, and it's not even simple to measure it. Let's leave the scenario aside for a moment and jump to some other details that participating in the process in parallel. It's important to know that what we measure the dynamic range in a stop. One stop is representing the doubling or halving the amount of light. Kind of same as when we stop down or up our exposure. But don't forget, changing the aperture by one f-stop doubles the amount of the light allowed in. So in the case of the aperture, a stops is f-stop. Similarly, cutting the shutter speed in half is a 1 f-stop change. However, it's not an f-stop because it's not an aperture. Human vision is complex. Not only do we have the different ability to see the colors and light, but we also process what we see in our brain, which interprets the colors and light in the different levels. Our expression is divided into the two parts. The center of the gaze, the cells that see the colors and require the bright light are less numerous, the edge of the field of the vision. The cells that see in the dim light are more numerous. Whether the light gets dimmer or brighter, the decline of what we see is very gradual. We can discern the details in bright light and see the colors, though not find the details, even in the brightest light. Our ability to distinguish the colors and details gradually decreases as the light gets dimmer, but we are able to see the motion and see the shapes into the shadows. This is the psychophysics. So basically, small changes in actual intensity at the low ends of this curve can lead to large changes in perception. But the camera sensor picks up a narrow range of the light and color. And photoreceptor cells respond uniformly across the field of view. Each photoreceptors pick up a color and light as they exist in the luminance range of the sensor. Furthermore, a sensor ability to capture the colors and details simply ends at the either end of the sensor's luminance range. The electronic camera sees the world as it really is, linear style, but the human perception doesn't. Our perception of the luminance is quite different. And this is important when it comes to how we translate the linear luminance value of the real world into the perceived brightness. We are more sensitive to the small changes of the luminance at the low end of the scale than at the high end. When the unit of the light or photons hit the photosite, a unit of the voltage is charged until the sensor is fully charged and no longer encoded the information. At this moment, the light turns white, or rather the light is cut off or clipped. If we graph the slopes at the scene, we see the straight line. But it doesn't make sense, since the way we see it's opposite to the way the camera sees, right? In photography, to measure our dynamic range, we use the exponential system called stops. So each stop increase means the doubling of the brightness measured in candela per square meter. This doubling of the brightness is also known on our camera dynamic range. So if we go back to our linear graph and let's say we have 7 stops, when we have our shadows below and highlights above. This means that our lights are always twice as bright as our shadows. And about 50% of the image details is in the highlights, everything between 128 and 255. And when more get darker, we lose more information. How we get benefit of this? Our perception of light is accurate in the lowest intensity, not higher. As we know, the camera doesn't take a signal as it is and blast it out into our storage. We use the gamma. It defines the relationship between the pixel numerical value and its actual luminance. Without gamma, shades captured by the digital camera wouldn't appear as they did to our eyes. Note that linear encoding uses a few levels to describe the dark tones. Even though this results in an excess level 2 after describing the light tones. The gamma encoder, the gradient, on the other hand, distributes the tones approximately evenly over the entire range. This also ensures that subsequent image processing, color, and histogram are based on the natural, perceptually uniform tones. This is also called the gamma correction, gamma encoding, or gamma compressing, but its terms all refers to a similar concept. We can name all this process as transfer function. TF or transfer function used in images and videos describing the relationship between the electrical signal, scene light, and display light. The optoelectronic transfer function, or OETF. That's the light of the scene as input, converted into the image or video signal as output. This is usually done in the camera or raw development software whenever the captured images is converted into a standard. It distributes in camera tonal level into the those that more uniform for perception, making the most efficient use of a given bit depth. Look at our linear chart. After we adjust 1 divided 2.2 or 0.45 gamma to our line, we see the result is a curve, and when we change the distance between the stops, as so far we pull the shadows. The electro-optical transfer function, or EOTF, decoding gamma, or display reference gamma. This refers to the net impact of your graphic card and display devices, so it can actually compose of multiple gammas. The main purpose of the display gamma is to balance the gamma of the file, ensuring that the image on your screen isn't unrealistically brightened. A higher display gamma results in a darker image with a stronger contrast, having a picture video signal as input and converted into the linear light output of a display. The opto-optical transfer function, or OOTF, is a transfer function having a light seen as input and a display light as output. The OOTF is the result of the OETF and the EOTF. This parameterized OOTF converts the ACES RGB, or linear scene, to the linear display RGB. This conversion bypasses a nonlinear display RGB signal, which is electrical in nature. This represents the net effect of all gamma values that have been applied to the image. For faithful reproduction of the scene, this should ideally be close to a straight line. A straight line ensures that the input, the original scene, is the same as an output. Furthermore, while our camera ideally estimates the relative amount of the photons hitting each pixel, our eyes or brain actually apply a tonal curve of their own to achieve the maximum visual sensitivity over the greatest, highest, or the lightest range. So the tonal curves are required for every image in one form or another, whether this be by our eyes, digital camera, display devices, and our post-processing. At the top of this, each type of the digital sensor has their own tonal response curve, and even PC's Mac computers apply different tonal curves when displaying images, or gamma. Now we're familiar with the titles like Gamma 2.2, 2.4, Rex 09, 2020, Log CS, Log C-Log, and so on. These gamma curves carry their own style in the way of their structure. We can observe them better on our waveform scope in our post-production program. I use the DaVinci Resolve, of course. With using the CST effect, we can apply input and output signals. Then we change the input gamma to see how our linear curve will behave, but in an input channel. See what the curves looks like when I choose the Log C, that's the RE. We see it pushing the ground and ripping up the highlight, or it's acting more conservatively with contrast. Remember the EOTF. Now we do it in the other way, reset my input and set the output to Log C. Now we remember the OETF, which helps us to see more details in the shadows and be more careful with highlights. So that was a simple demonstration of the package or sandwich within hand as a file. From a camera to display is a sandwich of the different mathematical number, or from a data to our post-production table is the same again with a different mathematical puzzles. Just as I said earlier, this is a real math. Of course, you can try other gamuts to observe them better and to see how they react on the image. It comes in handy when you want to draw your custom curve to make a placement contract in your image. So I hope this video answered some questions, and of course it may raise more query. which is normal in their learning process. You can comment them under this post, then we can discuss it further. So until the next time, Shotgun is here, the founder of Shade and Grain. Enjoy the color.